Who wants to ask the first question? Yes.
I wanted to ask this at the end of the last session. With the one child in China being somewhat degraded, there's a huge population pressure. Could you address that?
Yeah, the question was, what has been the impact of the so-called one-child policy? First of all, it's actually strictly not a one-child policy. It would be better described as a 1, 2, 3 child policy. If you're Chinese or Han and you live in the city, you only can have one child. If you are an ethnic minority and live in the city, you can have up to 2 children. If you are an ethnic minority who live in the countryside, you can have 3 or maybe even 4 children. However, back to your main question. That social engineering policy has had, it's been incredibly successful. And for the first time in a long time, China's overall population is declining, okay? And the net population is getting older. Now that doesn't mean, that there aren't 1.3 billion Chinese, but it has been effective. I don't know if you want me to comment further on that.
Yeah, where are we going now? There's still a big population pressure.
Yeah, there's a big population pressure, but the real problem is in the decline in agricultural output. As urbanization is increasing, what do we see? We see wild land speculation. So people from the city are going out buying up farming land, and because of the change in land ownership laws that happened a year or 2 ago, speculators can now purchase land and sell it, as for building developments. China's land agricultural area is pretty small. I don't know the exact percentage, but it's nowhere near as big as America's agricultural sector. And so China is having to import more and more wheat, rice, you name it. So it's going to be a big problem for China. It's not so I guess this is a long way of saying, I don't think it's the population that's going to be the problem. I think it's the urbanization that is really going to be the problem for China.
Another question, please. Yes, go ahead.
I wondered about, some universities have lectures online, and is that, well, you just mentioned that the Saturday classes will be online. Is there any discussion or pros and cons of having more lectures online?
There are a lot of lectures at UW that have been videotaped. I know religious studies has been doing web broadcasts since the 1990s. And those are still sitting on servers. They aren't presently available because we didn't keep up with the software, but those can all also be easily changed. So I think if you watch and pay attention, there'll be a wide variety of materials from a number of places brought into this format and made available. Yes, sir.
Just comment on China buying up treasuries in the United States debt.
Yeah.
Should we be concerned? What implications could that have?
So the question was, should we be concerned about China's buying up foreign debt? My answer simply is, yeah, I think it could be a big problem. What do we do about it, though? I don't know. I'm not an economist, but and the papers are filled with the answer to that question, right? But it is a big problem. The problem is really fueled by the fact that China is again producing, like it was before 1800, all of the export commodities that the rest of the world wants. I mean, if you look at the net flow of silver into China at about the year 1800, it's amazing how similar the patterns of the flow of resources or precious metals looked in 1800 to right now. And I said this briefly in my talk, but I really meant it. China is once again back where it was at 1800 as holding a massive amount of the world's silver, or not just silver reserves, but capital, and it's a problem. What do other economies do with that? Now, the one thing that China has to deal with is rising unemployment, and how much good are the holding of those foreign reserves going to do for its own domestic issues? The Chinese government has just recently embarked on a huge domestic infrastructure investment campaign. I don't know how many $1 billion it was huge. And so they're trying to use some of that foreign capital to keep people happy. How successful that'll be, I'm not sure.
Yes, sir.
I was just in Cheyenne during the legislature, and one of the speakers there on the major oil find that is around Cheyenne in that area. I was surprised to find that the largest purchaser of a lot of those leases on an acquisition that was just in excess of $1.5 billion was China itself.
Yeah.
So I mean, it really has come to Wyoming.
Yeah, I don't think I need to comment on that. We were talking here at the table about China's role around the world. One of the things I've been involved in for quite a while is Sino-Iranian relations. My own work is done in southwestern China with Chinese Muslims. And one of my good friends and colleagues at Yunnan University has, in the last 3 or 4 years, established this Sino-Iranian institute at Yunnan University. The whole context of this, or I should say the goal of this, is to further the good relations between China and Iran. Okay? Now, he's doing this from a historic perspective, looking at the links between Islamic communities. But I would argue that it's all focused on the same goal of China needing resources. And, the U.S. is being beat at this game in some significant parts of the world. We have no presence in Iran. I think that's a huge problem, But, and again, I think it goes back to the whole business of, does your foreign policy consist of engagement or isolation? And China is choosing the path of engagement.
I will make the comment, just to sort of add to Michael. The state of Wyoming has not been blind to the growing importance of China. In the legislature a year ago, I believe, they passed a couple of very small bills that promoted education in Chinese language. And there's now education available to learn the Mandarin, the main Chinese dialect, in all of our community colleges and in all of the high schools that choose to participate. It happens to be based originate with the university, more by accident, I think, than anything else. But the state legislators, is my point, recognize that we are going to have increasing engagement with China, and that our citizenry, our students need to be involved in that. After all, Chinese is the most commonly spoken language in the world. We should know it. I saw a hand there. Yes, sir.
This is, I think this would be in Carol's area. Would you care to comment on some of the initiatives that the university is getting involved in the extraction area, or clean coal, sequestration? We've heard about the university is wanting to get involved in this, and it makes a lot of sense, but what are the specifics of some of that?
We've got 2 major initiatives, and they're actually run each of them a little differently. The one you mentioned about the Clean Coal program is actually a state program funded by the legislature, and it's the monies are distributed through the Clean Coal Task Force, which also is almost the same as the Energy Resources Council. This gets very complicated. And that is the group that oversees the School of Energy. So even though the requests for proposals go out on the University of Wyoming server, the proposals that come in are judged by this panel that really is part of the state government rather than the university. Nevertheless, some of those have been awarded to the university research community. And there are a variety of different kinds of projects, but one of them that I know a little bit about is one that seeks to collect CO2 out of a coal flue gas stream by capturing it onto a solid substrate. Then it could just be buried in the landfill. And that's a lot cheaper, if it works, than collecting it as a gas and compressing it and then storing it underground. So that's an example of the kind of work that's being funded by that fund that the state actually has allocated. The other one you mentioned, which is geologic sequestration of carbon dioxide, I think that's something that the state has seen as important because so much of our energy production is coal-based, and because coal combustion produces more CO2 per unit energy than does gas or oil, that if there's a tax or any kind of assessment on carbon dioxide emissions, that our economy stands to be challenged. So the university is trying to be proactive in preparing for underground storage of CO2 as a way of mitigating that extra economic challenge. And that work has been funded by the Department of Energy and the state. Again, a few years ago, the Department of Energy really stepped up their funding for this kind of work. And so we were able to get into that funding stream, built it up to about 18 million, and then the state actually allocated some of our abandoned mine lands funds to augment that. So what's going on right now is a project to do the geologic characterization of 2 likely sites. And then the state's money would be used to demonstrate, so actually drill an injection well and inject carbon dioxide and basically prove the site for future use.
Yes.
This goes back to China when you said that agriculture production is probably one of the more serious challenges that China faces. What has China done to remediate or to improve the land that is desertification, where it has just taken so many trees down, and it's in fact we're feeling that the effects of that in this country. What is China doing to reverse that now?
Yeah, so the question is, what is China doing to address desertification? Desertification, if I'm saying that right, those studies have been pretty important for at least 150 years. There are big institutes of desertification in a number of northern universities whose provinces are directly affected by the southern move of the Gobi Desert. If you go to Beijing, Beijing is becoming increasingly plagued by sandstorms from the Gobi. The current estimate of water consumption is for the city of Beijing is that Beijing's water supply is going to dry up in about 5 years if current consumption continues to exist. So lots of Chinese scientists have been working on this problem, and some of the most cutting-edge technologies for desertification are going on in China. A retired professor from the university that I know has gone over there a number of times, and some of the people in the School of Ag are working on some of these issues in sort of joint research studies with some of their Chinese colleagues. Does that answer your question?
Well, I just wondered if you've seen it, that their efforts have been successful at all?
Oh boy. It's not an area that I know very well. I don't really know how to answer the question how successful they've been. It's pretty hard to stop the movement of these deserts, I think. But I really don't know. Sorry.
Well, this soft power concept, today, the average person in an urban area on the street, do they consider themselves a communist, a socialist?
Good question. What does the average Joe Schmo consider himself? A communist, capitalist? This is a question of identity, and it's hugely complex. Let me give you an example that's probably better than the question of, are you a capitalist or a communist? Okay? The question is really one of national identity. And the people I work with are Chinese Muslims. And so they are part of an officially designated minority group. I always ask my friends, what are you? Are you Chinese? Are you Muslim? What are you? And they'll give you different answers depending on what area of life you're addressing, okay? They'll say, my friends will all say, absolutely, I'm Chinese, because I am a citizen of this nation, okay, of China. But I'm also Muslim, because that's my culture community, that's my worship community. I'm also a member of this city, or a native of this province. Am I a communist? Yeah, lots of my friends are communists. What does that mean, though? To be a communist is really no more than to be a member of some other party that enables upward social mobility. Okay? So for my friends to say, I'm a member of the Communist Party, and I'm a Muslim, or I'm a Catholic, doesn't surprise me at all. Because these are all just roots of social mobility, if you will, right?
Yes, sir.
This question is probably for Gracie. The press and journalists have made a lot about the influence of the digital discussion and social networks on the current happenings in the Middle East. Do you agree with that, or have some comments on that?
Yes, that what we definitely have to admit is that technology had a lot to do with it in terms of Facebook and Twittering. But someone we were talking a little briefly during one of the breaks is the next step. It was able to organize people. Because we have a free press in the US, we've never had to worry about a state-owned media that existed in Egypt, where that determination was made by the president and the state of what would or would not be heard, what voices you could or could not hear. And so when you had this technology that allowed this connectedness, this ability to nonstop share and bring people together and create what we saw of democracy coming from within them. Now the next step is what some of the questions were this morning. Now you have to talk and you have to build that based on what do you want as a community, how do you identify yourself, what steps are next. And so it's got to go beyond that. One of the interesting things I heard about Facebook, and we have to remember, we were just teasing up here, I said, I think Zuckerberg is all of 26 now, is that here he created this social network that now all of a sudden, he's being very careful that they won't identify in any way with what is happening around the globe, and no more than saying people have used the website. But they don't want to be seen in any way as an ideology or a pro or a con. And so here we've used that technology in the types of way that you can, but the next step is how do they continue moving it forward now that they have each other's attention. And so undeniably, my background in newspapers says, oh, we were not, what I said this morning, the gatekeepers on this. Our foreign correspondent was not there with their notebook or their video, and they created the report on this story. All this happened internally. And so you can't deny that that is one example of where that tool magnified. You just can't deny it. Where to go from here, we're not sure.
But it's a definite force that's there.
Yes,
So
it is.
politics is going to change, or governance is going to change.
Something's going to happen.
Yeah.
How it
It's
plays
going to be
out.
very different. It's a
But
different world.
Something is going to happen because an opportunity to have those voices connect occurred.
Gracie, do you think it would be relatively easy for someone we would not agree with to capture Facebook and use it for their own ends? For example, a dictator in the Middle East, it seems to me it's so open, it could very possibly be hijacked. And we see it as positive now, but is it possible to hijack it and use it in a way that we would not necessarily approve of?
Well, we know historically with any kind of propaganda what can happen when someone takes it. One of the things that Wikipedia did with this whole open source and sharing, we started finding out there'd be a 19-year-old in his garage that said he was a professor of history, and that would give all of this information. And until we delved down into it, could we find out that he was 19 and he was sitting in the garage. However, one of the things that keeps happening is it keeps metamorphosing. And so even as someone kind of takes it and says, I'm going to try this, as you hear Zuckerberg, I think the last interview he had on 60 Minutes, he was taken to task about issues of privacy and the types of things they were doing. So that's the one thing about this digital technology. What I tell everybody, if it's digital, it's public. And so you need to know Facebook, Twitter, webpage, blogging, podcasting, whatever it is, other people have access to it. And so even in the notion where somebody might try to take some aspect of it and turn it into a misinformation campaign, you also have someone do what we recently saw, and they took it and they built something from it. And so that's what's unique about the period we're in now, is that it has that flexibility. But is that possibility there? Yes. Have we, in any of our research now, located anyone where they were able to keep something from occurring and shut something down? It hasn't happened. It seemed to have self-corrected itself. But Facebook and that whole social networking is such a phenomenon that it's almost like, you know, when that steam engine just keeps picking up and it gets going and you just better get off the track. It's that kind of thing. But it doesn't mean that somebody won't try, but it seems to have these self-correcting mechanisms that somebody else comes with something else. And my colleague here was sharing with me some stuff he wanted me to take a look at some people who are trying to do something similar to YouTube in China, and creating, again, another platform, and another dynamic to say, how will that be used? And I'll be interested to take a look at that.
You know, I want to just jump in though quickly. The thing that intrigues me about this discussion is the role of the state. And I'm not as optimistic as Gracie is. And maybe it's because my work is in China, and I see the state as pretty overpowering. I'm just not as optimistic that you know, it's always information will always find a way around those gatekeepers. But I don't know, that's just me. I'm a natural cynic though. What can I say?
Yes.
Yes, could you explain the differences in our educational system versus China's?
This is actually a fascinating question. And if you ever have students from China, one of the things that you'll find very quickly is that they are not used to discourse. The classroom is very much where if I'm the instructor or the professor, I come in, I give my lecture, or I tell my grad student, okay, I want you to work on this. They don't question that. So it's a very different paradigm of education. That having been said, the curriculum looks a lot like it does in the West. I mean, the Chinese curriculum. But there are different modes of inquiry. Now, to the degree to which these are cultural, I have no idea. I mean, that's, you know, who knows, right?
I will point out that the university has a large number of students that come from outside the United States, many from China, from Japan, from many Muslim countries. India, Pakistan. And what is interesting is a large number of them are in hard sciences, engineering, pharmacy, maybe a little bit in nursing, etc. Almost none of them are in the arts or the humanities, where we encourage free thinking, asking questions, analyzing cultural documents, from videos to books to whatever. They're not coming to study that. It's the humanities in the end that are the really scary, subversive subjects.
But that's actually not entirely the case, because the University of Wyoming has been, just in the last few years, building relationships, especially with universities in Shanghai. And the history department has now we're on our 4th year of hosting visiting scholars from China who come and are in residence in our department. And it's really interesting dialogue with these people, and they're always surprised at the level of freedom, not only that we expect, but that we demand of our students, and independent inquiry.
And the other thing is the technology is so interesting because people want to capture it. From time to time I get emails and they say, well, I read your book and when are you coming over to China to talk about us and how we can use this in our systems? And I was like, where did I get this email from? And where did it go? But there is this curiosity that's picking up. So a point you're making is that people are trying to figure out how to harness it and how to make the connections. And so it's kind of, it catches you by surprise when someone says, well, can't you come over and talk to us? And I said, who might I be talking to? But they want to know, they want to understand, you talk about that. I have one student who left communication and journalism last year. She did a master's. And out of nowhere, in January, she emailed me and she says, I'm working on this stuff we talked about in your class. You got to come over here. I'm going to stay in touch with you. And so we'll see if the president or somebody will give me some money to go to China. I might as well get that in there, right?
I see a hand in the back. Marcia?
Visiting scholars from Shanghai University at the University of Wyoming this last fall. And she teaches English at her university in China. And she was here studying the education approaches, the teaching approaches, because she really wanted to encourage her students to get involved in discourse and not to be as passive in their approach to learning. So I thought it was very interesting talking with them.
See, I think that we should get to ask questions.
Go ahead, Carol, if you've got one.
So here's the question. You had 3 talks from three very different people. What is the connection?
All right, there's always a quiz.
Scholarship. Answer scholarship, that's too easy. Maybe there isn't. I just thought you are a group that puts things together.
I think it's very, we've got the liquid, the solid, and then the gaseous.
Okay, that gives the creativity award.
I consider myself a rare earth.
I would say the vocabulary. You all use words I didn't know.
Well, unfortunately, that's a problem with professors. We spend all this time educating ourselves, and then we think we should educate other people. And using the words is one way of doing it. And as much as we try and edit ourselves, and I know most of us do, it just happens. You stand up and, oh no, everybody's watching me. I've got to be saying something, and whatever the formulation is in your head comes out, and sometimes you just can't get it quite edited fast enough.
You look around the room and you see quite a bit of gray hair in this room.
Some have hair.
And what would you say are the top 3 differences of students over, say, your teaching career? How are today's students different than, say, well, most of us are older than you, or some of us are older than you, than, say, you were in school?
The first one that hits me is reading. I'd like to see them read more. And I think that's one of the byproducts of our instant gratification with the technology, that everybody wants it faster and they don't want to read it. And I love the written word. And so part of it is that I believe in lifelong education, not just your formalized education through primary and secondary and college, but things like Sarah to You and things like magazines and books and going to museums. And that part I found, lots of times you get something on your student evaluation that says, there's too much reading in this class.
As a department head, I actually look for that comment to ensure that my faculty are doing their job. If it's not there, I wonder.
What are their writing skills? If they don't like to read, can they write? compared to other generations.
I think there's a very strong correlation between how much reading you do and how well you write.
And we do work hard in that writing issue. It's built into our core curriculum. In fact, I would say it's the largest single segment of the core curriculum is courses in writing. But it is possible for students to strategically construct their college education to miss other opportunities. And if you follow the research in writing, I know just a small amount about it. You know, there's been a whole childhood development curriculum of education in psychology and so on. There is also a developmental process in writing that is physical, that is mental, and often some of those changes don't actually take place until you're about the age in which most people are doing a master's if they're still in school. And so writing is something that cannot be learned all at once as a freshman. It has to be done and practiced, and gradually your abilities improve as you mature.
How do you capture their attention with all of these iPhones and iPads? And I'm sure that these students, I don't know what your policy is about carrying them in class and texting and communicating with other students.
It's a constant challenge. I have on my syllabus that says you're supposed to, turn off the cell phone and put it away. So when I shared that I'm teaching this online class, and I said, that means this in this class too. But of course I can't see if they're doing all of that when it comes on. But one of the things is we all talk about how it's a constant challenge. You're telling them to turn it off, when you're in class. But they're so good with those thumbs that, they can do it without even looking down now. And you have no idea unless you look over there that somebody's thumbs are going a mile a minute. And that's the challenge, is holding their attention at that moment.
We were just talking about reading and writing skills. What about oral communication, both speaking and listening? What changes? What's going on there?
Yeah, I'd like to jump in on that, because I don't find it a challenge to keep my students engaged, and it partly has to do with the whole way that I teach. I've really thought a lot in the past few years about what is learning, and I've really sort of figured out, at least for myself, that my students learn when they're doing active learning. And what I do to engage them is, it's really this, it's almost a discourse or a dialogue. And so I have really almost totally abandoned the sheer lecture format. And what I'll do at the start of every class is I will pose leading questions. And I'll assign students to answer the questions. And my students really kind of like that, because it engages them. And I've found that once I got past the old sort of lecture routine, where they're just sitting there taking notes, and that's kind of a passive form of learning. And I find that I have the same problems when students are trying to read a textbook. They don't really get anything. But if they're having to retranslate an idea into their own words, then they've learned something. And I really try and push all of my students to do that.
Very good point.
Just to get back to your oral question about oral performance, one of the things that universities have is some sort of general education. And one of the things that research will tell you is that they get changed about every 10 years. And usually it's just a tweak here, a tweak there, but it takes a year of faculty debate, et cetera, et cetera. But one big change that we did do the last time we revisited our general education requirements was to add an oral performance skill, to require all students to take one course in oral performance. And one of the things that has become very clear is that a large number of students do just fine. But there are other students that are absolutely terrified. They will postpone it and postpone it. They'll sign up, they'll go to 3 classes and then drop. And as a last semester senior, they still haven't done it because they're just terrified. On the other hand, I we have a school in Laramie that has kindergartners giving oral presentations. You know, it may be, you know, my favorite person today is X, and the 3 important facts about them are, but they get up and they say them, and etc. And I happen to notice my son was in the school, and as a 5th grader, he was in charge of an hour of classroom time between speaking and co-projects to support points he was trying to make and so on and so forth. And he almost had a meltdown. He was the 2nd person in the class to do this that year. It took the teacher a half an hour of talking to get him out to actually do it. And once he started, I mean, he'd planned and prepared and researched and worked out the wording, and parents had helped a bit. He actually did it. And to a large extent, one of us said, I think Gracie said at some point, it's about expectations. If the teacher sets the expectations and reinforces the completion of those expectations, you'd be surprised the number of students who actually do them.
We joke a little bit about, you know, some of them, but the majority of students, they do come around. I think Michael is correct in that assessment that if you put it there and you set the expectation and you show them and you stay engaged with them, and that's why I feel like the onus is on us to stay updated in what we're doing and our passion about what we're doing, that is what will come out of them. With the oral communication, and I used to teach that speech communication class at UW. One of my colleagues, Bo Bingham, who does the communication apprehension section, where these are people who are just mortified. I mean, just the very idea of getting up and saying their name. We have learned ways to work with them and help them see that this is something they're capable of. And I remember when I used to teach the class, people would come up and say, I'm not gonna make it in this class, I'm gonna drop, so I need you to sign it now. But I said, no, just hold on, you know, we'll take, you know. You remember a little show and tell you do when you were a kid? I said, we're gonna take little baby steps. So I think we, in one hand, we do have some who still, you know, struggle with coming forward with that. But I do believe in this expectation of if you put it there and then you show them, and then you show them that you're committed to going with them there, that they will do it. And then they'll be pleasantly surprised. We don't work at the widget factory, so the number of widgets we produce is not our reward. Our reward as teachers are when they come back and say, guess what I'm doing, and guess where I'm at, and guess what I'm doing now, and I'm teaching at so-and-so, and I'm doing this because you told me to keep at it. And then you go, they got it. That's the teaching moment. That's the day you go home and go, for all the days that you were pulling your hair out, something worked. And so it is there. I just think it's something that we're constantly pushing with. And then, you know, this texting, you know, my stepson told me, why are you doing full sentences? And I was like, because isn't that what you're supposed to do? And he's like, no. And so they all this cryptic language, you know, I didn't know what LOL was for the longest. And I just said, what is that? You know, and so, you know, and he's like, well, that's laugh out loud. And I was like, okay. And so, you know, they've had this, so they're kind of juggling these two worlds. And then those of you who have, you know, members of your family who are sending those texts and email to you, you know you're sitting down and saying, what in the Sam devil is this? And what am I supposed to do with it? And then they're trying to explain it to you. But whenever we can, we try to sneak in there what a good sentence looks like. Wherever you can get it in there, we'll just sneak it right in there. But I think, you know, we have to, and I mean, I am an optimist. I really am. I'm a realist. I know I live in a real world and I know it has real issues, but I'm also one of those people that believe hope does spring eternal. We just have to keep showing them just a little bit.
I think we've probably got time for one more question. Anybody?
Well, you asked the question, what linked all this? And it's inquiry. The human being wanting to continue to learn. And that's what links what you're doing and what we're doing and so forth. And I think you obviously are teaching that as well.
Pretty cool. I think we can't end on a better note than that.
Well, all right. Thank you very much for coming. We've enjoyed talking to you. Thank you very much.